Wonder if everyone could take their seats. I apologize, we're a couple minutes late, literally two. We're going to start in about 20 seconds. Thank you. Okay. Wonder if everyone could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll? Thank you.
Alderman Lauer.
Here.
Alderman Sage.
Here.
Alderman Milwamoy.
Here.
Alderman Stearns. Alderman Painter.
Here.
Alderman Schmidt.
Here.
Alderman Black. Alderman Howman.
Here.
Alderman Fruin.
Here.
Mayor Renner.
Here. Thank you very much. We have a quorum. We're going to go ahead and we're going to start with public comment. And just so that everyone knows, we have up to 3 minutes in public comment at every one of our meetings now. And it is typically not something where we go back and forth in terms of dialogue. I do want to say we had a mayoral open house on Friday. We have them every Friday before a Monday council meeting. If you want answers and you want to engage in dialogue or you want action, that's usually the best place to come. So anyway, just an FYI and a plug for the mayor's open house. Here, this is an attempt to let citizens speak on pretty much anything they want. And we're going to go ahead and start out with, let's see, Mr. Robert Vasquez. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Good evening.
Good evening, City Council. Thank you for the opportunity for me to speak this today. I'm here on behalf of West Bloomington Revitalization Project, as well as a West Side resident, and come to thank you. Thank you for your support you have shown us this last year. I'm also here part of our housing collaborative partners, MCCA, Mid-Central Community Action, as well as Habitat for Humanity, or I'm sorry, got nervous, huh? For Habitat for Humanity for McLean County, that's what it is. I wanted to share a thank you for the Community Development Grant. This grant has done a lot for West Side Bloomington, WBRP as well. With this grant, it benefits our housing program we have at the WBRP, which aligns with our mission statement, which I'll read. Driven by the voice of residents of the West Bloomington Revitalization Project, facilitates impactful, collaborative efforts of neighbors and local stakeholders that honor our historical and cultural roots, built on the pride and strengths of our neighborhoods, and empower residents to be leaders and achieve a vision for better community. This housing program helps low to middle income residents with rehab projects as far as either if they need new windows, if they need help repairing a roof, or building new porches. We built a lot of those this past year, so thank you very much for your support on that. I also like to thank the city for their support for the tool library. What is a tool library, you ask? Thanks for asking. I will tell you a little bit about it. Our tool library program is just like the Bloomington Public Library is. Instead we lend tools out, and this is all free. If you have not had a chance to visit it, I encourage you to visit our offices at 801 West Washington. As a matter of fact, today is the first year anniversary of our new location. So please come visit us. I'd also like to thank you for the land for our community gardens. We have a community garden on Roosevelt Street, as well as the provision of water, the use of water on that location, and we also have another one on Grove Street. Thank you very much for that. We appreciate that, and so do our residents. Lastly, I speak as a resident. I'd like to thank the city for their support in engaging with our community. A lot of us have our individual opinions, but I know the city has put a lot of effort and energy to listen to our voices. So I would like to thank you with that. And as well as Public Works for doing an incredible job every time it snows, the Bloomington Police Department for their policing efforts and engaging with our community. So again, thank you for your time, and we look for another bright, successful year. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Josh Fishbump Schmidgall. Hi.
Hi there. Fist Bump here from Ian Bain's morning show on Cities 92.9. The garbage wars are here, as you know. Ian predicted that months ago, so I wasn't surprised. The good people of Bloomington will be paying a new garbage tax increase. After that tax increase on gas, a tax increase on property, a tax increase on amusement, I'd say it was amusing to watch the city waste money, but I'm afraid I'll be taxed. So now that you're going to waste taxpayers' money to pay for a study that will tell you to waste more taxpayers' money, here's a fist bump quickie. Stop wasting money, cut the size of the scope of the government instead. Why not give that a try? I'm sorry for the people of Bloomington that have to pay for the failure of this government and this mayor. Thank you and have a good night.
Patricia Martin.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Just before Christmas, I attended the Governor's Conference on Aging in Chicago, which is organized by the Illinois Department of Aging. We had close to 1,000 people came from all over the state, including Michael O'Donnell from the East Area Central Agency on Aging and myself from the Bloomington area. Senator Jason Barrickman introduced me to the organization, so I have him to thank for the opportunity. I gave 2 lectures, one on writing as catharsis, which had an attendance of 30, and another on elder abuse, which had an attendance of 60. Much of the material I used was similar to that of my presentations here, so I have all of you to thank for this opportunity as well. What was gratifying was the number of people throughout our state who are obviously interested and concerned about elder issues. For the audience included not only professionals in the field, but individuals with similar problems of their own, many willing to share their stories with other members of the audience. The stories were touching and disturbing, ranging from current problems in nursing homes to childhood conflicts with teachers, and not a very pretty picture, to be honest. Thus, I have been able to see from the local to the state level the necessity of continued work in this area, which gives me an increased incentive to continue my work here as well. And I thank you for your support in this too. After I came home, I had a meeting with Dante Latson, the CEO of the YWCA, who is interested in putting together stories showing contributions of the elderly, possibly in video format. And I just made a more recent contact with Dick Maxwell of the DeWitt County Triad, a national group I heard about from the Attorney General's office, which joins seniors with law enforcement officers for assistance against crime. The group has state and regional sections, often organized on a county basis through the sheriff's office. And I'm just beginning to sort through this material, but what I'm finding beneficial about it is that it enables and encourages older people to help themselves. And finally, Chicago at Christmas was quite lovely before the cold hit. The trees along Michigan Avenue were covered with lights. Sephora was next door to the Marriott Hotel, where the conference was held, and I also went to a shadow puppetry workshop at the Art Institute. And I want to wish all of you a very happy New Year.
Thank you. Elton Franklin.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. First of all, in extreme sadness, but at the same time in solidarity with them, Je suis Charlie. I find the act that took place in France most reprehensible. I have had personal experience on pulling a trigger on a fellow human being, but that's because they were pulling one at me. They weren't drawing cartoons. I believe in free speech. I believe we need to attend to things like that. On the matters of a more mundane nature, those who do not learn from the lessons of history are doomed to repeat them. Insanity, by definition, is repeating acts known to have negative consequences, expecting different results. I say that in respect primarily towards the proposed hiring of folks who, as I understand it, to quote Jim Karch out of the Pantograph, greatly underestimated the number of carts that were going to be used. If a firm can't even count, if they can't even do a proper projection, I think it's pretty insane to hire them to do a rate study. One last thing, I had heard talk, and more talk and more talk, with regards to tap-on fees and making developers pay their own way. And yet, remarkably enough, there's two items in the agenda, under the consent agenda, no less, pretty much giving another free ride. I understand that, yes, it's six figures in one case, but given that there's 84 units, I don't really consider that an appropriate sum, especially considering that there were a number of zero balance line items. Why that is, I have no idea. But it's getting real tiresome to stand up here and talk and hear talk coming back and see no action, no reasonable course set to accomplish anything positive. I hope that with the new year that some of my hope for new and better ways of running this city and serving the citizens of this city without ripping out the bottom of our pockets reaching for the next dollar, I truly hope that that can be realized. Thank you.
Gary Lambert?
Evening. It's wonderful being retired. I was able to listen to the governor's speech this afternoon. One of his points was his first executive order is going out to the heads of all agencies to freeze all non-essential spending. May he do more. I see on tonight's consent agenda, we've got an item for $77,000 for a water study, sewer study, whatever it is. From the information that I've read in the past and what's presented there, it's pretty obvious there's a need there. And I think we've got some pretty intelligent people working here for the city. And if we need to raise rates, why don't we just raise rates? Why do we need to pay someone $77,000 to give us the answer back that we already know we have to do? To put it into plain terms, that's roughly 3 squad cars, which does the city more good. Thank you.
Thank you. And we move on to recognitions of appointments. We have. I'm terribly sorry, but I can't at this point. The public comment time is over, and if you would like to, you can certainly talk to us afterwards, or you can certainly come to the next council meeting or come to an open house. If you have a particular issue, I'm very happy to talk to you about it. You can talk to me right after the meeting. If you do want to make public comment, though, we're going to need to have you do it at the next council meeting. I apologize. Uh-huh. Okay. Well, and I would. Okay, well then I would ask you then, if you could come to the mayoral open house a week from Friday, as well as here, and discuss it and then make a public statement on that. Uh, a week from Friday is the mayor's open house at 4:30, right over here. You don't have to make an appointment, just come on in. And then, or 2 weeks from this evening. And then you would need to fill out a card before the council meeting, okay? For 2 weeks from tonight. Thank you, ma'am. Thanks. No, I apologize. Thanks.
Mayor, as
Yep.
a point of privilege, can I make a comment?
Sure.
This lady has spoken with me a few times and asked about making a comment tonight. And I think if Chief Hefner will talk to her now before she leaves, she might be able to get her issue
Okay.
resolved.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the chief is going to speak with her, and then we can follow up. Okay. Anyway, first of all, we now then move to recognitions and appointments. We have the introduction of Laurel Schumacher for the Citizens Beautification Committee, and I do see Laurel is in the audience. Laurel, if you would stand, please, and appreciate that. And then also John Hanson to the Airport Authority, and I did talk to Mr. Hanson this morning, and he was going to be unable to join us. He certainly sends his regrets, and these are two people I think will be outstanding appointees to both of these respective boards. And are there any questions of perhaps of Ms. Schumacher, since she's in attendance, by members of the council? All right. All right, let's go ahead and move to the consent agenda. Consent agenda are generally considered to be items that are routine in nature, but are there any items that any member of the city council would like to have removed from the consent agenda?
Sure.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'd like to pull item 7D.
7,
D, D.
7D as in dog, okay? The storm rate study, okay? 7D, all right? And,
I'd like to pull item Q.
okay, 7Q. And that is the petition by Marty Ray requesting annexation rezoning, okay? All right, so 7D.
Mayor, I would like to
7Q.
pull 7J.
7J. And just to be clear, we're on the right, that's the application of St. Joe's. Yes, okay. City Manager David Hales?
Mayor, as city manager and corporate attorney, would like to recommend that the council pull and table indefinitely item Q. We are still working through some issues that we're trying to resolve with the petitioner.
Yeah, Alderwoman Painter already pulled that.
Yeah, pull off the agenda, table it indefinitely.
We would require us to have a separate action on that, correct? So that is, we would approve the consent agenda minus these items, and then we would specifically re-entertain this and then table it indefinitely,
Sure, yeah,
correct?
we can do that as well.
Okay, right.
Mayor, with regard to the consent agenda, I have not received any monies or financial benefits from any of the individuals or organizations referenced in these specific agenda items. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exceptions of my item 7D, 7J, and 7Q?
So moved.
Moved by Alderwoman Howman. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, a second by Alderman Flower. Okay, now let me go ahead and... Everybody voted? I think I have one more. Okay, there we go. The motion carries 7-0. There are no nays to announce, Madam Clerk. And now we will move on to item 7D, and I believe that was Alderman Milwambwe, the award for the sewer and storm water rate and impact study analysis. Alderman Milwambwe, you have the floor.
Sure. Thank you. I think as you've heard from comments from the audience, and as well as what you've read in the Pentagraph, and I've received emails as well about this study. So I do have similar questions myself, and I think we should. It's important that we give the city manager or we have an opportunity to hear from the city manager what I guess how this decision was made. So I do have quite a few questions and hopefully, I will be afforded enough time to ask those
Well,
questions.
I can start it with Mr. Hales and have him perhaps give an overview, and maybe he will answer your questions.
Right, right.
And if you could just explain perhaps some of the concerns
Right,
or
and I should add, I think the primary concern, I think that's foremost on most people's mind is the fact that this is the same company that, came up with the projections about the carts, and yet we're using the same company. So I think, in the eyes of the public, they're seeing they were wrong last time. What is our what guarantees do we have, that they will be right next time, or at least a lot closer in terms of their projections? So let's start with that then.
Mr. Hales.
First, let me say I think it's very unfortunate that maybe people are a little misinformed about Raftellus and some of their estimates early on the number of carts. Basically, we did ask one of their associates to help us in trying to estimate long-term what the revenues and expenditures of the solid waste fund were going to be. At that time, they laid out a number of options to raise rates, but they could only speculate at that time as to what our citizens might request in the way of carts. Keep in mind that many communities only allow citizens to have one size cart. Usually it's the largest. There is some that also would allow two. However, we are very unusual in that we have three size carts. So there wasn't a lot of national data to help use as a resource to help predict how many residents may go with the lower size cart. Furthermore, when that projection was made, it was prior to the council establishing the final rates. And as you might recall, one of the actions you took is to keep the rate on the smallest carts constant over a 3-year term. That was not known by Raftellus ahead of time. Again, this was all preparatory. So there was some council policy action on fees after the fact that I think was a major determinant as to people going in and actually deciding to go with the lower size cars. So again, these are all projections. They're all estimates. It's just like when the city tries to project a sales tax revenue for next year. We can guess. We can look at historical data and information. And once again, there just wasn't much historical data on these 35-gallon. And furthermore, Raftellus didn't have the luxury of knowing what the final council decision on that, keeping the $16 rate constant over 3 years. So I think there's a lot of information that is relevant to where Raftellus really shouldn't be the so-called scapegoat. But anyway, Raftellus has a extensive reputation nationwide, and I've been in communities where we've used them for rate studies. I've also used other firms to do rate studies of this nature. So I think there's great value in having a firm like this help us do this type of rate study. Now, one of the things we'll be looking at with them is going forward, after we look at all aspects of operating, capital costs, and all that goes into a very complex, rate analysis, oftentimes we can purchase or after this first go-around, try to internalize a lot of that same process and procedure. But we've got to keep in mind, we're very lean on staff. We don't have the added capacity to really devote someone to this rate study right now and get it done in a timely manner. Our estimate is that this could be completed within a 5 to 6 month time period. But all the work that goes into these types of studies, we just don't have the manpower to do it as they would. But hopefully going forward, we can accomplish that. I think probably the greatest mistake we all might make is if we don't do the study and then we go for a rate study or a rate increase, people are going to ask, well, why? What's the justification? Why is it needed? And on and on and on. And that's one reason these studies are done, because we're not only looking at the cost today, the cost in the future, I'm sure even in some of the past rate studies, I think before I came here, a water study was done, maybe a sewer rate study, and I'm not sure what you paid there, but I did share in an email. It's not unusual to see these very detailed and financially involved studies to cost somewhere in the $50,000 to $100,000 range. Keep in mind the 76,000 or whatever it is for two studies. So really the sanitary sewer is one, the stormwater is another, so we're getting two studies really for that price that we've quoted here in the memo. So let me start with that and see what other questions I can help answer.
Okay. Well, I'm going to ask one other question. I think others might have other questions as well. The other question that I have, so to the average person, there, and I think it was alluded to earlier, is that why don't we just increase the rates? Because we know about how much we need in terms of work, right, from the master plan, the sewer master plan, and it's mentioned in the memo. So why don't we just increase the rates?
I think we
And
could
not
ask you, the
use-
council, are
right.
you ready to increase the rates today? Do you need a rate study? But keep in mind, I don't think it's always that simple. No doubt, when you have about $130+ million of deferred maintenance, it's unlikely. We have the financial capacity of a city or the, to undertake all that. We need to kind of not only identify the priority of these, we need to ensure that the solid waste fund and the stormwater fund stay fiscally solvent. The biggest portion of those funds almost is operating costs and expense, and that's a critical area where we need to dig in there and find out, truly should all those operating costs be in these funds, or should, that's one thing we'll be looking at. These master plans also have identified a number of improvements that should be made in operations. We haven't spent a lot of time trying to identify those costs. We need to look at that. Even right now, we're struggling with how to move ahead with Locust Colton Phase 2. We don't have the financial capacity. So we today, even as staff, don't have a recommendation of what those fees need to be, what our future costs of operating and capital are going to be. I think there's going to be a variety of pay-as-you-go, borrowing, combination. But right now, we could, we're really not in a position to intelligently provide you with a research and detailed recommendation of what these fees can be or should be, and maybe options for a alternative of fees like we did with the solid waste and giving you several options. Nor do we have the existing manpower to kind of prepare those in a short period of time.
Okay, I think I'll yield to others, who may have questions.
Any other questions? Jim, did you have a question?
I do, and do we want to get a motion on the table? I do not want to make one
Actually,
myself, but
is there a motion to approve this then? No motion to approve? Okay, well, the motion dies of a second. Okay.
Wait a minute, I'll move to approve it.
Okay, all right.
Sorry.
Move to approve the rate study?
The rate study?
As presented, yeah.
Yeah, I'll approve it.
Okay.
I'll make the motion to approve it.
Is there a second?
So moved.
Okay, second by Alderwoman Howman. Okay, so we do have a motion on the floor, and thank you, Jim.
sure, thank you. A few questions, very similar probably to what we've seen on emails and what Maboka has outlined. Let me get some housekeeping items out of the way first. I guess I would have preferred that in looking at the staff report, excuse me, that we would have known what the bids were from the apparent other companies that were interviewed. But I don't see that in the background information. Not a big deal, I guess. Excuse me.
If that's a question, then we should maybe let the city manager respond.
Just briefly, the process we use is very similar to some of the engineering processes. It's more that Jim, I'm thinking of that term. Well, it's a statement of qualifications, but for engineers, we go through, what's that? Quality-based selection, and that's the process we used here. We did interview, had a number of proposals. We even interviewed, I think, 3 or 4. Based on that, we selected what we had determined, like we do with the engineers. What firm did we determine was best experienced and had the expertise to undertake a study of this nature? Based on that, then we worked with them in negotiating a fee that we thought would be reasonable. So that's kind of the answer is, but we could give you those other names and the other firms, that were considered in the beginning.
I appreciate that explanation. I'm not sure why we would not give us those numbers or firms in the future.
And we'll include those.
Thank you. And I guess the gist of my comments are this, that when you do a silo study like this, and that's what we're doing, this firm is going to come in and give us recommendations on stormwater and sanitary sewer up to maybe a 20-year projection. And I think if we would go back and look at our history, I'm not sure how often the council accepts the consultant's recommendation in full. And the reason I say that is because you got to put all these silos side by side. And we're going to get also recommendations on how to fund pensions, how to fund our refuse and recycle, our roads, et cetera, et cetera. And David, I think you made a good point that we're talking about deferred maintenance of $130 million.
Yes.
We know up front we can't afford all these things. So I don't think there's any way possible that this firm's going to come in their silo and give us a recommendation. And maybe it's guidance or background to what we might decipher and change to, but there's no way that we can bite off $130 million deferred compensation. The other comment that I'll make is 20 years is a long time, and I think as fast as life is changing now, I don't know if a 10-year evaluation or 10-year projection would be any better, or if it'd save us some money, but looking out for 20 years, wow, I just don't know how we can do it. And I have some reservations about this. I know I've supported these in the past, but it really boils down to what our council tolerance is when we get to budget discussions. And if we're going to increase fees on different items, it's got to be across the board and not all in one silo. Thank you.
Alderman Lauer.
Well, I'm just going to try to break it down and make it real simple here. I don't understand why we have to do it at such a timely point here. Why can't we, at some point in the future, couldn't staff study this and come up with maybe a little bit more basic recommendation instead of having to spend this money? I think Jim hit the nail on the head here. We don't have the money to do it right now anyway, and I don't think the people have the money to do it either. And so just increasing the fee, if we only look at the city side of it and just, telling the public that, hey, we got to increase the fee, that's fine. But at some point, the public draws a line in it, and they may make the decision that they're not going to live here any longer. And I'm hearing that, and that's of great concern. Thank you.
So just to clarify, I think probably one of the reasons why it might be 20 years is that also then would be the recommendations for how you might pay for it for a 20-year bond or 30-year bond or things like that in terms of the rate study? Would they explore long-term funding options?
Yes, we would want them to do that, especially given some of the capital needs and what are some of those variations on pay-as-you-go, borrowing, or a combination, and the priority, that has come out from the master plan. So.
Right. So, I understand where Alderman Fruin was coming from. He says projecting out 20 years, but it's not so much that you're projecting precise point estimates for year 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. It's that's the period of time where we might very well need to float a bond to pay for some long-term things, like we would maybe take out a loan to put on an addition to our home or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's Certainly those issues and others would come into play. We have some existing bonds and debt service payments associated with sanitary sewer, stormwater that have to be taken into account that are already fixed costs going forward.
Right.
And we've got to take into account too growth. And these are two critical utilities that are instrumental to future economic development. Some of these sites, and we've got a number of them in areas around the city that don't have, trunk sanitary sewer lines and stormwater. So all these are important factors to consider.
Okay, all right, we'll move the conversation along, but we've got last two, Alderman Sage and Alderwoman Schmidt.
Yeah, a couple quick comments. First of all, back to the solid waste study. I mean, I think David, you alluded to this. My recollection is the adding back in of the 35-gallon container. That was a council-driven um, request, and I think fairly late in the process, as I recall. Again, you alluded to that. What the consultants, what staff worked around was the 65 and 95-gallon containers. The addition of the 35-gallon was driven by started with an individual alderman at a council meeting late in the process. So again, it seems to be a little bit disingenuous to I think kind of paint the consultant in a bad study when the council chose to change the dynamics, the quantitative metrics, if you will, around the study.
And if I can just clarify again, while the consultant did know the 35-gallon had been added, there was very little, if any, comparative data
Sure.
around the nation. Secondly, they didn't know it came after the fact that the council kept the fee for 35-gallon flat. All the other options calls for the 35-gallon and the other two, the fee to continue to escalate.
Right.
So that was a major change after the fact that they just had no knowledge on, and weren't privy to that when they gave those estimates.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So,
Apologize.
so then back to the proposed study that we're now looking at. I mean, this is in fact in the larger scheme of things, this is the follow-on study to the master plan that was previously completed. In other words, the needs assessment has been done, right, Jim? And so now the next logical step is then to figure out, how much it's going to cost and how it's going to be paid for, and if additional fees are needed, what are those? And so I guess a question to the council is, and again, I think you mentioned this, David, if we don't do, what is the alternative that this council sees us doing if we don't do a study to figure out what's needed? And then again, thirdly, and again, as we always go through the budget process, this is always something that comes up. Again, I'll suggest, we as elected officials can't have it both ways. We can't say we're not going to hire new people, and then repeatedly throughout the year say, well, we need our people to do this. Those things just are kind of mutually exclusive, in my opinion. So again, this is just a continuation of a staff process, a program that's been put in place. We've done the needs assessment. We've done the what needs to be done. Now the next step then is to figure out how much it's going to cost and prioritize those as you suggest. And so again, I'm okay if we say we're not going to do the study. My question then is, what does this council suggest as the option then to proceed figuring out what a fee increase or some of the costs of that might be?
Alderwoman Schmidt.
I have a somewhat different question, I guess. Thinking about the study being done, I've heard comments over the years about the way that we charge for stormwater utility rates, for example. So I'm looking at the staff memo that talks about single family and duplexes. Small parcels are X amount, medium, large, and then parcels other than single family and duplexes. And I'm thinking about Jim Pruitt's comment about this being 10 and 20 years out. It makes me wonder whether this company, is this the standard? Is this the standard way a community figures out stormwater utility rates? Or people will say, why, I might have a small house on a large piece of property because of our different zoning over the years. So why are those people paying so much more when they actually have a smaller home. I mean, the rationale isn't easy for me as an alderman to be able to explain to people. And so I guess I'm wondering, what actually are we getting out of this study? Are we just getting an add-on of what makes rational sense for, instead of picking a number out of the air, that we come up with,
Yeah.
sort of an objective way of figuring out what it's going to cost? But then I'm wondering about the whole kind of formula on on how it's based. I mean, what all are we getting for this?
First, let me give you a little history. As I understand it, back in 2004, when the city first levied a stormwater fee, to my knowledge, what I understand, there was no master plan. There was no, established plan both for operating and capital of how we were going to use that fee. It was a new fee to help institute a new program, and that was going to be a dedicated fee solely for the purpose of ensuring that we can maintain, operate, and continue to build out the stormwater system in order to be in compliance with federal Clean Water Act and other requirements. Later on, the methodology that was arrived at, which looked at impervious material, is very common because it does identify what is your impact on the stormwater system. How much water running off your property is going into the system that you're impacting. Is it a large impact, a small, medium size? So from residential area, every city I've seen, that this is the type of methodology they come up with. But once again, what we're still weak on is, even though we now have a capital improvement plan for stormwater, we're still struggling with some of those maintenance. What is the maintenance, plan now in the future? Is what we do now sufficient? Is it satisfactory? Could it be better, to help avoid flooding situations, in the future? Do we have good performance metrics, to measure our efforts in controlling stormwater runoff? And as you know, we've got a serious problem over on the east side. So the typical process is to do your operating plan, your capital plan, come up with your methodology, and then institute a fee. And then about every 5 years, plus or minus, do an update to ensure that as new information comes to light on the condition of the system and its components, and as operating costs change, you look at going through a study like this, an analysis, to come up with, well, what should that new rate be? And how can we justify that to the citizens and the businesses and all those who are going to be impacted by paying that fee, and that we can all intelligently help explain, why is the fee needed? What's our long-range goals, operating capital? What are we trying to do? And how are we trying to keep, catastrophic stormwater flooding from impacting areas of the city? How can this fee and these master plans help mitigate that or prevent that? And help communicate that to the citizens. Without, a study like this, and especially on operating and what we're doing, we can give you our rough opinions, but we don't have much to go on
Okay.
at this point in time.
Okay. All right. At this point, then, a vote aye would be in favor of the motion to award the sewer and stormwater rate and impact fee study. Vote nay would be against. If you could please vote. Okay. The motion passes 6-1. Madam Clerk, there's one nay to announce.
Alderman Lauer
Okay.
as a nay.
Okay. Thank you. All right. We move now on to item 7J. And who asked to... Oh, Mr. Fruin. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. I will make this brief. I'm going to make a comment here about conflict of interest. I'm going to make some additional comments in Alderman's discussion, so I'll make this portion of it brief. But I will simply say that, as previously expressed, my past interpretation and practice of whether a conflict of interest exists has been guided by the longstanding City of Bloomington legal opinion with regard to two primary considerations of, one, whether an individual has an ownership or financial interest in the entity being reviewed, and secondly, whether an individual has management or decision-making authority with the entity being reviewed. As with a similar situation in these council chambers 2 months ago, my role with the OSF Medical Center is also volunteer-oriented, and I do not have any ownership or management authority within the OSF Medical Center. These comments explain my long-standing practice to responsibly follow our City of Bloomington Legal Department guidelines, and as demonstrated over my 15 years in serving on the City Council. So with that said, I will proceed with making a motion that the liquor license be approved for the OSF fundraising event.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Alderwoman Schmidt. Any further discussion? Okay. Again, if everyone will vote, an aye would be to give this liquor license. The motion carries 7-0. Thank you very much. No nays to announce, Madam Clerk. Oop, excuse me. There we go. And now we move to item 7Q, and I believe I've turned that over to Alderman Milawambwe, or was that Alderwoman Painter? I'm sorry. Thank you. And this was pursuant to a comment earlier made by City Manager David Hales.
Right, I just asked for it to be pulled at the request of the petitioner.
Okay. And so at this point, as I understand, the city manager was asking that we vote to defer this.
Yeah, table the matter indefinitely.
Indefinitely, so not a time certain.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And is that your motion then? Then would you make a motion to table this
Yes.
indefinitely? Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderwoman Schmidt. Okay. And, whoops, excuse me, I'm sorry. If you'd all vote, go ahead and vote then. An aye vote would be in favor of tabling this indefinitely. The motion carries 7-0. There are no nays to announce, Madam Clerk. Thank you.
And Mayor, just for the benefit of the council, as soon as we have all these issues resolved, we'll be back to you as soon as possible. So we hope it's not a long delay, but as soon as we're ready, we'll put it back on the agenda.
Okay, thank you very much. And we now move ahead to our regular agenda for the evening. And the regular agenda is discussion of the Citizen Summit to be held on January 20th, 2015 from 6 to 8:30 at the Bloomington Center for the Performing Arts. The Citizen Summit is part of our broader commitment to continue to have citizen engagement and full public participation, movement toward transparency and culture change. We had one several years ago that was a bit more focused on, I believe, a master plan. But at this point, we are basically going to have 100 people, 10 that will be nominated by each of the 9 aldermen, and 10 at large by the mayor, who will participate in 10 groups 1 week from tomorrow evening. And I will turn it over, I think, to Mr. Hales, if you, and maybe even Nora wants to come up and clarify some of the logistics of this, and then maybe even get council input as to how we'd proceed.
Mayor, I'd suggest maybe if you'd like, maybe we could turn to Alderman Sage and Alderman Schmidt, who are very instrumental.
Sure.
You can cover about basically
Absolutely.
anything we would offer.
Let's start with Alderman Sage.
Yeah, and thank you, Mayor, and we certainly weren't, I don't think are intending to take 30 minutes to talk about this. So I think maybe we can be a little bit shorter. But to echo what the mayor said, the intent is for the aldermen to invite each of us to invite 10 people from our wards to participate in this. Let me encourage you. I know that we've all received communication from Nora about making sure that we get the names of those folks from our wards turned into her, because so we can have name tags and take care of some administrative things. And I think, Nora, you primarily wanted those by Friday. Is that the cutoff date for that? Next Thursday? Okay.
I mean, well, this Thursday.
This.
Because it happens a week from tomorrow. Yeah. Just to clarify that.
Yeah. I just, again, a little bit about the agenda and a little bit about kind of what to expect that night. I think we would anticipate that, at least what I've shared with the 10 people that I have invited, is that they will most likely be the only person from Ward 2 at their table. In other words, there will be a person from each ward, an elected official at each table. A staff department head will kind of serve as the scribe and somewhat of a facilitator. We will have an agenda, and I'll just quickly touch on the high points of what that agenda will be. We'll have public comment, and then we'll move right into a little bit more of a formal agenda that will include a welcome, a video welcome from the mayor, as I think you'll be out of town at the U.S. Conference of Mayors.
I didn't realize that when we set the
Yeah.
date for the summit.
Yeah. Then we'll have, this is pretty fundamental meeting management. We'll have an overview of the agenda. We'll have a little bit of the ground rules. I know I jokingly have talked with some of the other aldermen, just mentioned. I know we all find ourselves having to do a fair amount of talking. Our role that night will be to listen. We will not be part of the conversation at the table. We will be listening. Then we'll have an opportunity where we're going to have three specific topics that we're going to be talking about. And these actually mirror the topics that will be part of the budget conversation coming up later this spring. And they will involve questions and scenarios around some funding related to public safety, some funding, some budgetary needs around solid waste, and then the third around the funding around Parks and Rec. And again, these topics that individual tables are going to cover will mirror some of the exact conversations that this council will be having later on in the spring around the budget process. We'll have an opportunity where each table will have a few minutes, and again, this is going to be a very tightly managed agenda. Each table will have a few minutes to report out kind of what their table found. Then we'll have an opportunity for just some individual participant comments. Again, not a lot of time, but if specific kind of learning, some aha moments that folks had who were participating in it, they'll have the opportunity to be involved with that. We'll move in, at the front of the agenda will be a budget overview facilitated by David and our finance director, Patty Lynn. Then we get towards the end, we'll do a wrap up, talk about some next steps, go over the budget timeline, and then afterwards the elected officials and the city staff people will stay around to answer individual citizen questions and other comments, and I would expect some of those conversations to continue on. That is a very high level overview of what the Citizen Summit will be. Again, I would encourage you just as quickly as you can, even if possible before Thursday, to get the names of those 10 folks turned into Nora so that she can work. Again, it's around more the administrative task of preparing for a meeting to manage 100
Just
folks.
as a clarification, though, are we assuming that Nora will contact them, or the administration will contact them, or that we will have contacted them?
Thank you. These are folks that I have contacted. And I think Nora's communication was kind of put the charge on us to contact these folks in our wards directly. If I remember the communication that you sent. Thanks, Terry, for clarifying that, because that's a good point. Yeah, we will have had these conversations as I've had, gotten those names put together and communicated them to Nora.
And the purpose of giving that information to Nora, I don't think we've clarified that, because this will give you the opportunity to provide name tags and that sort of thing. I'm not sure we've settled on whether these individuals will be receiving anything prior to the meeting, the agenda. We talked a little bit about how we deal with the results of the survey and how that plays into this conversation, because I think our goal for the survey maybe was overreached what we were actually able to do with the survey given the short period of time.
Yeah, and thank you, Karen, because Nora, I guess we did talk about a draft agenda the other day. I think it's fairly firmed up. My hope is that you can share that with the aldermen so that, because I've told all the 10 folks I've invited, I'm going to circle back around with them and give them, I've told them at a high level what it is, but I want to put that kind of specific agenda into their hands. And so
Yes, absolutely. You can expect an agenda shortly. Staff is working right now to tidy up those three scenarios that David alluded to, and once we've done a little bit more work on that, we will distribute the agenda.
And Karen, back to your point, the online survey wraps up this Friday.
Right.
And, I know I've been promoting that within my ward. And so we want to share, I think, make those results available to not only the aldermen, I think, but I think we also want to have that information available as part of the Citizen Summit meeting as well.
Right, I think, the survey, I think we ended up developing questions that gave us very high-level kinds of feedback, very rough kind of roadmap of priorities, and some of the comments that in the first iteration that you sent out, I think helped us understand that that survey needs work. And it was our first attempt.
Sure.
And it's not going to be perfect, but I've appreciated a lot of the feedback that people took a lot of time to respond and put written comments on it. And I think it would be valuable and informative for the folks that we've invited to kind of see the kinds of feedback that we get all the time as they think about the scenarios we're putting in front of them. And maybe we don't spend a lot of time talking about the survey in a real granular way, but I'm not sure how you want to handle that, Nora. I mean, it's long enough that we're not going to be printing this out for everybody.
Right. We can make an electronic version available, though, certainly.
And if I can, just to clarify, I think for this Friday, what we do intend to send out to everyone, all participants, including the council, is the results of the online survey. So we are going to try and
Okay.
compile those so that
Good.
you'll see what was received in total. Everyone will receive the 3 case studies, and we're trying to keep them brief, like no more than a page each. And then we'll also submit the programs and the cost of the programs is ongoing worksheet, which Alex emailed last Friday.
Mm-hmm.
So those are kind of, I think, at least 3 documents together with the agenda that we want to get out to everyone on Friday. So they'll have them available for next Tuesday nights, a week from Tuesday nights.
Thank you for clarifying that. That's kind of what I thought we had agreed to, and I think that also means that we need to provide you with the email addresses of everybody, not just their names and their mailing addresses, but
That
a
would be
good
very
email.
helpful. In the case that you aren't able to provide those, then I'll rely on you to forward that information to those that you've invited. Mhm.
Boca.
David answered part of my question, but I also wanted to know in terms of the time is 6 to 8:30, and do you anticipate using the whole time? Because I know some people have challenges with that, in terms of committing 2.5 hours or so.
It will probably take every bit of that.
Okay, all right, just want to be sure.
Okay. Other question, Alderman Fruin?
Just one comment. I appreciate everybody's work on this, staff and council and mayor. And I think it is another reminder that I think more than ever before, we've reached out and asked for public input in all my experiences. And so I think this is a very good thing to be doing. And I kind of hesitate to say this, but I'd never make it in journalism, That's why you got that job of public relations. But I want to, and I shared this with the council, and you can consider it, what's the word I'm looking for, sensitive. You can look at it that way if you want, but here it is. Back in December, there was a headline that said, Bloomington, tell us how to spend money. And I don't want to make too much of this, but maybe the headline should have read, Bloomington, tell us how to manage your money, because we're really looking for anything and everything we're going to get at those tables. And I guess this just kind of sends a message to some, maybe some sensitivity again, that we're here to raise taxes and we're here to raise fees and ... But I think we've done a great job at reaching out to the public and talking about all the needs and wants. So again, I guess I'd never make it in journalism. Thanks.
Other questions, comments, Alderman Sage? Oh, okay. All right. Anything else you want to add, David or Nora? Thank you so much, and thanks for all your hard work on this. Awesome. Thanks. Okay, we're going to move right along to city manager's comments. Mr. Hales?
Mayor and Council, just a couple of quick comments, and then we'll all go home and watch the National Football Championship game as it's being played, but
Some
just
of us will go to sleep. We're too old.
Just very briefly, we are beginning planning preparation for our annual Illinois State Legislators work session. Just if we are trying to prepare some things for staff, just in a draft form, we'll get those out to you, but so I did want you to know we are trying to plan for that. Be thinking is if there's any ideas, topics you think we ought to incorporate in this upcoming agenda, please let us know. Anyone who wants to look at last year's packet of material and topics, please let us know. We can get you another copy. Second, just wanted to indicate that we'll have more information forthcoming, but Nora, our communications director, is beginning planning and work on a spring session of the Citizens Academy. So that's something that we think, that early work is being done. You'll hear more about that later. I also appreciate Alex, the directors, and others. We sent out to you last week another installment of priority-based budgeting, trying to put some costs to different programs. And I just want to stress again, this is still a work in progress. Keep in mind, we've been spending, a couple of months on this. Lincoln, Nebraska spent 2 years before they even began, a lot of outreach with their priority-based budgeting. So please, but do give us some feedback. We're still looking at how to continue to improve that. This is an early version, but we promise to get that to you at the end of this last calendar year. We were just a little late, but please look that over. Give us some feedback on that we delivered to you. And with that, just say, go Oregon Ducks. So turn the time back to you.
Anyway, thank you. I just also wanted to give a couple of updates. We did have a very well-attended open house this past Friday. Some of it was because I wanted to make sure that on the eve of the Selma movie that I called attention to the 50-year anniversary of the Voting Rights Act and why it was so important for the United States in so many different ways, it winds up being, as I made the point on Friday, the strongest or most radical piece of legislation, whichever word you want to use, in many ways, and it had its intended effect. Within 3 years, for the first time in American history, in 1968, a majority of non-whites voted. And we talked about why Selma was so critical. It was actually well attended. About 30 people showed up, and most of them hung around for the open house, which was good. So we had a pretty robust open house as well. And we haven't solved all the city's problems yet. I will, 2 weeks from tonight, be giving the address that I gave, 10 minutes or so, my address, very concise state of the city address that I gave last year. I think it's important to say, the progress that we've made, the challenges that we have ahead of us, and what some of those options are. So I will be giving that 2 weeks from today. I also want to say I did go to see the old Carmike Cinemas Palace on the far east side, and they, remember if you recall, early last summer, they came for a liquor license to change their business model. Frankly, cinemas throughout the United States are really having serious problems and struggling as their business model in the midst of Hulu and Netflix and actually television shows that are perhaps many times just as good, if not better, as movies. So they're really struggling to try to reinvent themselves. I thought when they wanted to meet with me almost a year ago that they were going to close down. And they actually invested almost $7 million in the Palace facility. It is almost complete. They will be inviting us to attend just prior to their soft opening in early February. It was very, very impressive, especially since I've been going there for 15 years since they opened up. So I thought I knew where bathrooms were supposed to be, and it was very different. So when you come in, it'll be kind of like a sports bar, mini sports bar. You don't actually have to go to a movie to sit there and eat and order drinks or whatever. And then you go inside, and then the number of seats is 1/3 of what they had. They're going from 1,800 seats to about 600. And so it's a very, very different business model. They've taken away one of the the rows as you go up, so when they're bringing you food, amidst the movie, you're not going to be obstructing people's view of the cinema. So it's actually a very interesting design, and so they will be inviting us early February, and they have an issue. I'm trying to help them with the apparently the FAA is being a pain, bureaucratic pain in the lower extremity, because their heating equipment has been sitting since Thanksgiving, and they have to have FAA approval because it's under the runway. So that's something that might delay them, but that is their target soft opening. But it was, again, very, very impressive, and hopefully we will have another new engine of economic growth in our community. But that's all I have. Aldermen and women, thoughts? Start with Alderman Fruin.
Couple things, please. First off, I think I noticed Constitution Trail was cleared. Did we clear that this week? Saw some people using that, so if we did, thanks and kudos to those that did that. I know that's not our highest priority, but really appreciated by those that use it. Secondly, I'd like to take a couple minutes and talk about conflict of interest a little bit and a couple related issues. It's been in the news the last couple months. I've got kind of a prepared statement I'm going to read. It's going to take me a couple minutes. And I'm going to read it because I think there's a tremendous amount of misinterpretation sometimes that occurs. So if you'll bear with me here. And I'll say this, that over the last 2 months, there has been quite a bit of community conversation about the issues of conflict of interest and ethical conduct. Many in the community have asked me why the city of Bloomington does not have either of these issues defined and formally accepted by each elected official. Several have pointed out to me that the formality of the conflict of interest statements and code of conduct policies exist with other government entities, to include our McLean County Board, which adopted an ethics ordinance 10 years ago. Many of our local State Farm employees have reminded me of the expectation and requirement that they sign a conflict of interest form as a condition of employment. The same holds true for the many community organizations for which we serve, as well as the professional organizations we belong. These two issues have also resurrected community criticism of our past action to place term limits on our boards and commission members, but not apply the same criteria to ourselves. Many feel that the expectations we personally accept from other organizations or have imposed through an ordinance sends a real inconsistency of application. Others up here in the chamber have said we lack the credibility and trust of many of our residents. It'd be my suggestion that we, one, adopt a conflict of interest statement, two, that we adopt a code of ethics, and three, that we amend our city ordinance that the same term limits imposed on those we appoint to boards and commissions also apply to ourselves. With this said, I am providing two pieces of communication relative to these issues. The first is the conflict of interest policy adopted by the Economic Development Council, and for which the city manager, the mayor, and myself are obligated to sign, and that was given to us at our December meeting for us to sign. And the second is the previously circulated code of conduct for which 6 aldermen and the preceding mayor signed following the 2011 elections. And I'll close by simply saying the choices and direction to take from here is ours to make. There's not going to be any public outcry asking us to do this. It's a choice we have to make on our own. I believe in doing so, it would speak volumes to rebuilding some credibility and trust in our residents. So thank you for letting me read that. That's your copy.
Thank you, Jim. Okay. And we have if the media wants any of the specifics, we will have that as well. And let's see, Alderwoman Schmidt, and I guess you're it.
I just wanted to encourage the council to put on their calendar the police community dialogue meeting, which is a week from Thursday at City of Refuge Church from 6 to 8 p.m. There is an online survey that requests comments or questions up front that give our police and our state's attorney opportunity to think about, really having well-formulated and informative responses, and I think it'll be a really good conversation. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I was remiss in not mentioning that. Okay, at this point, is there a motion to adjourn? Nobody
So
wants to
moved.
adjourn?
Just
Moved by Alderwoman Schmidt. Is there a second?
Yes.
Second by Alderwoman Hellman. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you.